I didn't know when I would write a book, but I did know it would happen. But what is so beautiful about how life happens, I was on my friend's podcast, Therapy for Black Girls, and I'm not a therapist, by the way, but Dr. Joy had an off-cycle, podcast where she interviewed non-therapists, and she brought me on to discuss what it meant to be what it means to have sisterhood in business. We had a wonderful conversation around community, connectivity with building and scaling our enterprises, but from there, my now agent, Rebecca, was listening in on that podcast. She reached out to Dr. Joy and said, "This woman has books in her. Do you know her for real? And connect me if you do." That started what is now No One is Self-Made, Build Your Village to Flourish in Business and Life. But I guess I got discovered from a podcast, and Rebecca, when we got on a call together, she had pages of notes saying, based on this podcast, you need to write a book about this whole village concept and getting away from individualism, because that's what I talked a great deal about on that particular podcast. But from there, from that conversation, I started to build out my proposal. Then, of course, the process of meeting with different publishers, and the proposal was so well received. We got offers from all the major publishers with the exception of one, and I decided to go with HarperCollins with the Day Street imprint because I was just so moved by the young Anna, the editor there, Anna, formerly there, Anna, because she was young and on fire, and I thought we would be a great pair. But that is how this book landed into the world. And the title itself and the subtitle, I do think it is time for us to have something to say. And No One is Self-Made is a very pointed title. You read it and you're like, it's strong. I'm a balance of both strong, but the softness is in that subtitle. I wanted to ensure that what I put out in the world, that people knew that my primary focus in talking about No One is Self-Made is to get us to go back to the village, and that we would not only do well, we would flourish in business and life if we build our village. And so when people spend time, first, when the title gets you, the subtitle, I believe, brings you in on the journey that the reader would take when they read this book. What the publishers who I was able to interview with, what they loved the whole concept of the village, in the way that I was talking about it, in for this particular generation. They were excited that, number one, I was a business owner and my business model is built on building community, building a village. But they loved the themes from the book that I was also talking about, not just scaling businesses, but talking about alignment, following life assignments, what I call divine assignments. They were also very, very moved that I wanted entrepreneurs in this book. I'm pleading for them to be well, mind, body, and spirit, because that is sometimes atypical in the entrepreneur small business world. We often hear about scaling to 10x and less about making sure that you are doing all the positive and healthy things to quell burnout, decision fatigue, anxiety, imposter syndrome. This book encompasses all of that, and the proposal did as well. So they were really excited that I was taking a more holistic view for a business book, because that's where we ended up landing. That I was just taking a topic of, yes, about growing, but less about growing the individual. But when that individual gets success, then the community, if it's the right type of entrepreneur, the community will be able to grow with that entrepreneur. So they were excited that, yes, this would be in the business world, but this would be a different type of business conversation, a different type of business book. You have to strike a balance when you're writing a book that is also meant to be inspirational, but also you want people to get the book and do something with it. It's also very much so a guide. So I was very disciplined in my process to, yes, give inspiration, but to also make sure that it's prescriptive, because inspiration without direction is just a book that made you feel good. And I want entrepreneurs to do something, think differently, build differently, scale differently. And so some of the stories that I was able to pull out, was when I opened my retail store. So when you come to Atlanta, you got to come by the Village Retail at Ponce City Market. Why that story is so important for entrepreneurs is that I had to practice what I preach with pivoting. I talked about pivoting all the time, all the time. But during the pandemic, my village market, which was very much so an events driven business model, I couldn't do any of that. And so I had to figure out who I was going to be as an entrepreneur. So when everybody was shuttered in place, and then the data came out that I think it was like 47 or 48% of businesses were shuttered during the pandemic. I told myself, if you do not pivot, you're going to be in that number, in that number. So many entrepreneurs came to me during that time because they saw Village Market as a resource and continue to do so, asking me, what can I do to help? And so I did classes around the PPP loans, if you remember that, getting entrepreneurs the support that they needed. But for my own business model, I decided that I was going to do two things. I was going to open a retail store, and then I was going to launch my nonprofit, Our Village United. Because what I learned in my business model that if I'm deeply driven by events, then what happens if something happens and you can't do that event anymore? I never even thought about a time where I couldn't do that event. But the pandemic, I think, gave us all a hard life lesson. And so my retail store, Village Retail, now is open 7 days a week. I'm able to support these entrepreneurs, to give space to entrepreneurs every day at one of the highest foot traffic locations in Atlanta. But why that story is so critical is that I opened this retail store in the heart of the pandemic. So while we were shuttered in place, working out my lease agreement, working with interior designers to build a retail store with zero experience in retail, none whatsoever. But I prepared myself for when the world opened, that the Village Retail will be there. And almost 5 years later, retail Village Retail is doing so well. I'm so proud of how well it's been received, not just by the Atlanta community, but again, with it being a destination in Atlanta, we've had shoppers literally from all over the world. And so when they buy and shop, they're really buying from a special group of brands, and we bring in and rotate brands in the Village Retail as well. And then the second thing that I did during my big pivot is that I launched my nonprofit, Our Village United, because what I learned in the pandemic, so many entrepreneurs were not prepared. They were not loan ready. They were not grant ready. So what did I need to do? I always, when problems come, my knee-jerk reaction is to be reflective and then to create a solution. So I launched Our Village United, and we've going on almost 5 years. We have accelerator programs. We deployed $800,000 in grants, technical assistance, pro bono services, one-to-one mentoring. Also, with the wellness piece, we have over 7 wellness practitioners that are doing what we call the well classes for entrepreneurs, where they're talking about decision fatigue, burnout, and these things. But I tell these stories in the book for a particular reason. I was faced with a critical decision during the pandemic, as many of us were, especially those who had front-facing businesses. And what I knew is that I had to pivot with a purpose. And so while it was a crazy entrepreneur feat to open a retail store during the heart of pandemic, to launch a nonprofit all at the same time, both are doing so well. We've had, some of the Rockefeller foundations of the world, Kellogg, you name it, MasterCard has been some of our top funders because they believe in what we're doing and the impact that we've had to have. But I had to tell these stories in the book because we as entrepreneurs, and you know this, we'll be faced with moments when things are not so good. And it's indicative of our leadership, our mindset with what we do with the not so good moments. Will we pivot with a purpose? Will we pivot and also get better and learn from what the first thing that we did? And these stories in the book have been when people have sent me direct messages or messages on LinkedIn, they've told me thank you for giving them real life tangible examples of what I've done.